All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good evening. This is Filecoin Core Devs number 50. Today is Thursday, the 6th or 7th of October, depending on where you are in the world. And as usual, we have a very large and probably quite packed agenda today, so we are going to jump into it. Do you want to first flag what we're going to be discussing today, because there were some last minute changes as different core devs surface different interests and needs. We're going to first start with just a quick review of sort of the rules that govern the core devs call. We've sort of debated this over the last couple of weeks as we've gone through the fill poll process, but want to remind everyone of sort of the decisions we made in June of this year, and then also add a couple of qualifying elements to that as well. Then just a very quick update also on sort of next steps related to Fit36 and the fill poll process. And then Jennifer is going to also give us a quick update about planning for the V17 network upgrade. Then finally, we will turn it over to Steb, and he is going to walk us through the F4 address class proposal that has been in the discussion forum for a couple of weeks now, and we will open up to Q&A. All right. So let me check, make sure no questions. All right, great. So core devs, this is the definition we've always had. I am going to ask for some grace a little bit. I'm quite tired this week, going to refine this language a bit just so it's direct and exact. But this is really always how we've thought of core devs. And as there's more interest in having people join this meeting, just want to make sure everyone is on the same page about the purpose of this meeting and what you do as a core dev, what is expected of you. So very importantly, core devs are a technical governing body. And although there are many instances in which the people on this meeting overlap in other work areas and are asked to wear many hats, Jennifer, I'm going to use you as an example, is on the Lotus team. She's a FIP editor. She's also a core dev. When you are in this meeting, the ask is that we surface technical discussions that affect broad swaths of the protocol, and that we really focus on discussing sort of the technical developments and strategic changes on the governance and technical side that core devs are going to ask to provide expertise around at a given moment. So this includes hosting technical discussions, reviewing FIPS, weighing in on critical network infrastructure and security issues. And as we saw very recently with the fill poll process, it also means over time taking on more and more governance rights in the network and helping us reach consensus, especially when we have very critical or divisive issues to work through. Very importantly, I want to stress that the core devs group should not be a technical planning group per se. This is a place where we've had some process collapse in the past. And again, I want to stress that individual core devs may be very relevant to the technical planning for network upgrades, et cetera. But going forward, we should create clear delineations between what is the plan, the timeline, the scope, and the actual content of FIPS we are discussing, rather than asking this very large group of different stakeholders to weigh in and provide very detailed guidance, because that is probably not the most effective use of everyone's time. So a couple of expectations for core devs also, and a way to, if there's a member of your team who's trying to enter and they can't, please let me know. There's someone in the waiting room. I don't know who they are. But that being said, a couple of things I want to flag. Core devs are expected to attend meetings, and that is really the threshold we use to determine who is a core dev. We have a Slack channel as well. The Slack channel should really mirror those who are standing members of this meeting. And in the past, this has always been the expectation as well. We have just not actually kept really solid attendance or been very strict with this requirement. Going forward, I think we will be. Right now, the numbers that we've considered are, if we're meeting on a monthly basis, if you miss 2-3 meetings, we'll definitely be in touch to make sure that you're still able to participate. If you miss more than 4 within a year, we're going to remove you as a standing participant. And this is just to ensure that core devs are engaged over time and are a consistent point of reference when we need governance decisions made. We don't want core devs sort of coming in and out as they have different FIPS that they may be authoring, et cetera. Additionally, one new thing that we'd like to propose is to actually cap the number of core devs who can come from a single team. For a lot of teams within the Filecoin ecosystem, your team is tasked with working on the protocol. So it would make sense that you have protocol expertise and may all want to be here. But again, because core devs imbue governance responsibilities, we want to make sure that representatives here are well balanced. And we're going to ask that if you have a really large team, or in the past your entire team has participated, that you think of who the top 2 representatives ought to be, and they can come and be considered standing members. As always, these meetings are recorded. Anyone is welcome to watch them afterwards. And additionally, if you are a FIP author at a time, or we are discussing something that is related to your work, of course, observers and participants are welcome to come in. They just wouldn't be considered standing members. And the last thing is we expect just sort of consistent engagement over time. If you're pinged in the core devs channel, please respond. Please be aware of FIPs as they move through the repo. And also be engaged in providing feedback when you feel like there's something that you need that you're not getting, either in terms of communication or other types of notices. So I will pause there. I don't think any of this is new for most folks, but do want to ask if there are any questions that anyone has. We'll check the chat.
I guess like for the last point there, like the consistent engagement with FIP drops and discussions. Is this for like each individual, or we can work as a team, like each individual like governance group should do that?
Sure. I think this last piece, this is not like a really strict like list of obligations. This is more just to say that if you're coming to a core devs meeting and we flagged that we're going to be talking about 3 different FIP proposals, it's expected that you've actually read through those proposals before the meeting. It's great if core devs are, kind of maybe once a week or every couple of days, taking a look at new discussions that come in and participating in those. Across the board, I think people are really good at this. We see a lot of engagement and really good conversations happening in the governance forum. But it's just a reminder in general that this is part of that workflow. It's not a strict requirement, again, but it is something we want to see. And I will note also that all of this is sort of a high-level overview, but we will add details to the TPM repo and make this very explicit as well. It will always be there as a point of reference. And again, the goal of having kind of like rules and procedures for this thing is just to make sure everyone is on the same page. It's not to keep anyone out. So of course, it can be flexible. If you want changes and you feel very strongly about them, you can let me know too. And I think the last thing to note is that when it comes to admitting new members, if someone asks, we're happy to add them as a core dev. We can flag it for the group in the channel in case anyone has a reason why they don't think they should be here. But we want to give people the benefit of the doubt that they have a reason to participate until they give us a reason to think otherwise.
Yeah, thanks a lot for this, Caitlin. I think it broadly makes sense. 2 quick notes. I think you mentioned this verbally, but I think it would be useful to be clear that being a core dev is not the sole way to have access to the core dev meetings. And so, those are 2 distinct groups, kind of the distinction between standing members and folks who have contributions to make, whether that's they have a new FIP or they really feel strongly about some discussion that's happening, or they just want to attend. So I think that'll be, we're not trying to gatekeep the meetings themselves, I think. Second note is with regards to what's on the slide right now, I think there, especially with leadership and engagement, there is a little bit of subjectivity there, but I don't think this is a problem. We are a small enough group that we can subjectively, in a case-by-case, I'm not saying you can subjectively on a case-by-case basis, decide whether consistent engagement has been met and so on. One day we might be so large a group that that's no longer feasible, but I think this is fine for today and for the near future.
Yeah, I have no problem pinging people and asking them to do stuff. So I think we'll be okay. And I think Axel asked in the chat, do we have a list of teams that each would have 2 members? Honor system, this applies to every team, applies to the Filecoin Foundation, applies to CEL, should apply to Lotus and Forest as well. I don't think there's a need for us to keep like a really exact list of core devs all the time, but we can. And if so, we can just publish that in the TPM repo just to keep track of things.
I'm sorry. Yeah, just particularly, I think this is important because I think it happens more and more that teams start fragmenting and forming sub-teams. I mean, like in CryptoEcon Lab, we're reorganizing ourselves and dividing in 3 sub-teams, but presumably we would be still CryptoEcon Lab. But so in that sense, maybe not right now, but in the near future, maybe useful to formalize. These are the teams that we keep track of, not these new sub teams or whatever. Just a vague.
Sure. Yeah, I think I follow. Happy to make it explicit if that drives clarity for everyone too. I think within Crypto Econ Lab, as you guys reorg a bit, it will also just be up to you to how you want to delegate that work. If you think, there's 3 sub teams, you want 3 members, we can talk about it. It probably makes sense. Again, we don't want to be overly rigid. We just want to make sure that there's a good balance of representation on the call.
I think Loda's team is going to be in the same boat, as well as we will have like sub teams, like maybe over the next couple of months. Our plan there might be we will rotate team members as like if the next like priority is working on storage market, then maybe Zen will be our expert and joining the core dev on that like effort for that period. And if we are working on consensus, maybe Ayush and Magic will like step in and like swap out with Zen. Like I think we might rotate within the team as well.
Sure. And again, people can come in if they're working on something of interest to the group. I think for individual teams, we can just look at it on case-by-case basis too, affirm a standard and go forward. We do have a lot of topics to get through today, so I don't want to spend too much time deliberating this. Molly, do you have a question as well?
I've pushed back against definition as stated here. I think one, I don't think it makes sense to cap the number of core devs per team. You could maybe when it comes to voting on things, cap number of votes. Sure, cool. That's a governance piece of it, but being a core dev means something different, which, engaging in like technical leadership about the evolution and development of the Filecoin network from an implementation perspective, from a design, from security, et cetera. And there can totally be teams where like there are multiple people who are very core to that, playing those sorts of roles. And I don't think it makes sense that like 2 of you are core devs and 4 of you are not core dev. I think it sets a very weird expectation of what it means to be a core dev. I think people who are on core implementation teams who are making important technical and design decisions for the evolution of the network are all core devs. What it means from a voting perspective can be something else. And I think that's okay. And so I would delineate those 2 things. The other thing, I don't think synchronous participation in this meeting should be a bar for whether or not someone can be a core dev. Again, we're a remote distributed community across many different time zones. Like I know we moved this meeting around to try and enable that, but I think asynchronous, like important participation by proposing, reviewing, like commenting on FIPS and their evolution, things like that should also be a viable way for people to participate in a leadership role in the community. Like, for example, I think it would be kind of I expect Juan to very infrequently come to synchronous meetings because people are super, super busy. However, I think, core dev sets a lot of very core leadership direction for the network, is very involved in like reviewing and like commenting on direction and giving people mentorship and advice. And so some of the bars here seem to be excluding participation instead of pulling the knowledge and expertise needed to make this network great.
Yeah, I understand where this is coming from, and we have actually run this meeting historically in that way, where it's much more open, there's no real requirements, and we have this much looser definition of how we're using this meeting, and we have found that has caused problems in actually enabling us to like make decisions and understand who is responsible for what.
But I think, the difference is this is a meeting, and this meeting can have its own structure and format. The core devs group and membership of making decisions is a different thing. And again, we followed the Ethereum model when we started out on this, and core devs are not only the people who show up to this meeting. These do not have to be one and the same thing, but I don't think that you can define the core devs community, the people who are like discussing FIPS and their implementation, by who shows up to a synchronous meeting. Often the people who show up to a synchronous meeting are the ones who are involved in active design and implementation of what happens to be the important thing at the moment. And then maybe for 6 months, that is not the important thing, and they're focused on research or they're focused on some other piece, and they're not coordinating as closely with other people in the core dev community, but they remain a core dev through that period of time. And so these are 2 different things from my vantage point, who attends this meeting and who is considered a core dev.
Yeah, I think we just have a different perspective or vantage point about like what we are trying to achieve with this meeting in particular. So I think we should just we can do it publicly too, but I don't think we should take too much time to deliberate this here because we have 40 minutes left in the meeting, if that's all right. So we can continue to like move through these questions and concerns, but make sure that we have like a clear standard very soon for folks. And I think Molly may have, oh, you're still there. Great. Okay. Is that okay?
Yep. Yep. I'm trying to find to move through it. I think we should again have a public definition of what a core dev is and put that, you know, in the TPM Notion or TPM GitHub repo. But I'm happy to also, like, you know, having started this initial group, I'm happy to define kind of what was in my head when we created it and like the examples we're pulling from other networks.
Sure. Sounds good. Raul, did you have a question?
Sorry, I had a thought around this, but I don't know if you want to move on. Basically, my thought was I'm just gonna like try to be very concise. I would love it if the definition of core devs would be centered around meritocracy. This is how it works in many other open source contexts, like for example the Apache Software Foundation, where in general, like applied to the context of Filecoin, I would expect that core devs are actively engaging in FIP discussions. Core devs are actively proposing new standards. Core devs do not necessarily need to attend synchronous meetings, because I do agree with Molly that, you know, the attendance to meetings is going to vary on a lot of factors. But in general, there's a general expectation that every core dev would review FIPs, would provide stewardship, would start discussions proactively, and would just contribute to evolving the protocol. And in general, this is like, you know, it's broadening the definition to not a set of hard rules. It's maybe a more softer definition that is kind of like that hinges on the concept of meritocracy. But I can post my thoughts as well, async.
Yeah, that's very valuable. I think that's the trade-off we have to balance is we want a group of experts, but we also need to know when we have to make decisions or ask for consensus, who they are. And in the past, when we've had a broader definition, we haven't had that engagement. So we can strike a better balance. We can do it publicly. Appreciate your input. Do want to move on real quickly and make sure that we have plenty of time. So a quick update, switching gears, but relatedly, Philpoll and Fit36. There have been a couple of different, updates, asks, requests. We have a bunch of different sort of stages of retros planned. Right now, we are working through planning an in-person retro for internal stewards, core devs, the engineers who worked on this, anyone who was in that Fit36 Slack channel, we can think of as a general mechanism for what we mean by internal. At Protocol Labs Lab Week, we will also have a virtual component to that. So if you will not be in Lisbon in person, you can participate. We will have async feedback surveys for both internal and external community members. And a lot of teams have already been doing small retros. And Dave Costanaro from the CEL team, he and I are working to sort of gather that async feedback that teams have generated amongst themselves so that we can incorporate that as well in a giant case study that the Filecoin Foundation is also writing about this process. We also have a couple of questions and things that we're working on immediately that were sort of raised through this process. One is this clear criteria for core devs. The second is a codification of processes for what an emergency fit might look like in the future. Cataline from the DMOB team has already put together a technical retro for the Philpoll tool if we decide to use it in the future, and also additional guidance for proposing economic changes after Philpoll if that's something the group wants to do. Molly.
Yeah, I think awesome. Thank you so much for holding all these retro items, and there's really important work to be done here. On the feedback survey for external community members, I'm curious, like how detailed this is already planned to be, because I think there is a subset of the community that feels motivation to continue pushing on components of what went into Fit36. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think is really necessary to empower that group with the understanding of what, diverse community, very different feelings about what they did and didn't like. If we are to find something that is non-controversial that we can get behind as a network without needing to go through this process again, where there's like a lot of split perspectives. I think it's really important to understand as part of that survey, not just for like the folks who, to look at the different subgroups that were a part of the poll and do like a deeper dive into what pieces they were supportive of, what pieces they weren't supportive of. And I'm curious, is that already planned, or is that something that maybe we can, commit resources to that could help add that to the external survey of poll participants so that we can get that visibility?
Yeah, so this one, this is something that came as a request like from the foundation side as well. And this feedback is really related just to the governance process. It's not related to like assessment of context, interest area, or like perceived needs in regards to economic changes. I think if we were to do feedback surveys related to these things, they should be separate. The content and planning for potentially future changes and then governance process shouldn't be co-located in this case, but this is the one. Super flexible with this one. We wanted to make sure that storage providers in particular had a way to air their thinking and really just a way to share their thoughts and feedback and feel heard. So if you want to talk more about how we sort of co-locate that work, that's fine too.
Yeah, I think there's a question of like, yeah, maybe this is another thing too. It's not quite, it's a retro in some ways, but it's a retro for understanding like where the community now stands, because there was a lot of learning done over this period of time. And I think a lot of people have ended up at different places than where they started out in terms of understanding of like importance of various different improvements. And so I also don't think that there's consistent visibility, say among the core devs group, about the amount of division or the amount of support for different sub pieces of this proposal. And so if we can do a good job reflecting that to the community, we can enable any future proposals to be less contentious and be easier to build on top of. And so it sounds like this is a different survey, so maybe we add it as a different item, but if anyone wants to be involved in helping make that happen, I think it could be pretty valuable for giving the community that feedback on where people are very split.
For sure. Yeah, I think so. These retros are just related to the governance and the actual process. I agree that would be super valuable. If we can help coordinate, we can. But my feedback focus for these retros will be a little bit different. And I don't think you want me involved in the second one, just in terms of making sure work is distributed.
I mean, I would want you involved, but understand that you have a lot of things going on.
Thanks. All right. Molly, you and I should just connect after this meeting anyway, it sounds like, so we can align on these things generally. We do want to keep moving forward. Again, we're about halfway through the meeting, lots of things left to discuss. So Jennifer, with that, going to talk about network V17, timeline, etc. I will turn it over to you.
Yeah. I didn't expect I will be talking about this so early in the meeting, but can I get access to share my screen, please? I will be really quick. The V17's like stay on track. We just kicked off the butterfly upgrading yesterday. We are successfully on Shark upgrade. In case you miss it, V17, the code name is gonna be Shark. We are on Shark on Butterfly. We started to do some early testing. The migration is going well. For the Lotus team, today is like merge day. We are planning to merge a lot of the gold stake type changes and working towards our early stage RC1 to make sure everything looks good from the gold part of the things. I need to sync up with Forest on how things going on in V17. But the early timeline here, I'm gonna share my screen really quick. Everyone got to look at my very it's, by the way, everything is public in the Lotus roadmap. The project board is in the Filecoin. GitHub repo is also like public. But from our side of the things, we are planning to do the first RC of Lotus V1.18.0 next Thursday, October the 13th. And the calibration upgrade is scheduled a week later, which is going to be 27th. The butterfly testing is going to last a week and a half from now on to make sure we don't fork the calibration upgrade. And then the calibration upgrade is going to last for about like 3 weeks. And the mainnet upgrade will be on the November the 10th. Any questions at the moment?
Sorry, did you say the calibration upgrade is the 27th? Because I think we agreed on the 20th, right?
Oh, sorry, it's 20th.
20, yes.
I read this date wrong, sorry, 20th. But yeah. Any concerns and stuff? I mostly want to hear from like Forest, because like I know like for you, it's mostly just make sure the migration goes well and updating the Forest node. You don't have much like minor set of integration to do. So any concerns?
I think it sounds good from Forest. Like we would love to like be able to test on Butterfly Net, but if that's not possible, then like we can make it work on like just testing with calibration net. Yeah,
I think it will work because like you will have the bundle. We do have the bootstrap nodes like for you and stuff. I will send you the PR and you're welcome to join. It's totally feasible, right, Ayush? Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So long as it's easy to add a new network for y'all, that should be fine. The one thing I will flag, which will be a decent amount of work for you folks, is the migration itself, because that doesn't happen in the FEM. So that does need to get implemented. I have a write-up on kind of you don't have to follow the same pattern that we're doing in Go, but so long as the same overall set of changes are made, that'll be good. So I can send you the PR in Go as well as a write-up on how we're going about it.
If the Forest team need, we can do an early call next week to show you all the migration we're doing on the Go side to catch you up as well.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Sounds good. One risk that I'm seeing on the V17 is we're doing lab week in 2 weeks. Many of us will be in Lisbon. That's why we're trying to wrap up all the developer engineering effort before the lab week. So during the lab week, the only thing we should be doing is monitoring the calibration. Hopefully nothing goes wrong, and push the button of the final release of Lotus. But so far from testing, this looks on track. But that's pretty much it. Shameless plugin. We are hosting a Lotus and Brand Summit on November the 2nd in Lisbon as well. If you are there, do talk to us. We can sync on Shark as well.
Thank you, Jennifer. And sorry if I missed it, but when will the Shark upgrade schedule be released publicly?
Today or tomorrow, we'll see.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Any questions for Jennifer? All right, I'm surprised we moved through that so quickly. All right, well then, Steb, it's over to you. Back to our scheduled programming, less updates, a fit proposal on the F4 address class. Steb, you should be able to share your screen if you want to.
Okay, let me just quickly get this set up. And share screen. No, there we go. Okay, you should be able to see my presentation now. Can you hear me?
That's good. Here sounds
okay. Good. Okay, so I'm here to talk about F4 addressing, or at least what I'm calling F4. Apparently, other people also thought about F4 addressing, so this could get a bit confusing, but we don't have a fit member yet, so I'm just going to call it F4 addressing. Basically, this proposal here is to add an extensible addressing system where users can add new actors to the chain to extend the existing addressing system without having to get everyone to agree on that extension. For some background here, the current address classes are 1, 2, and 3, or sorry, 0, not 1 to 3, 0, 1, 3, and 2. And someone asked a question. So, yeah, so the current address classes are 0, 1, 3, and 2. 0 is the ID address class. This is kind of like what we use on chain for really, really short representations of addresses. These are not predictable. You can't know your ID ahead of time, and they're not reorg stable. They change if they change reorgs or if messages get reordered or whatever happens there. We also have these count keys. These are derived from public key material. These are larger. They're 21 or 49 bytes, depending which one you use. They are predictable, which is really nice. It means I can take a key locally, predict the address I'll have on chain, and I could even use this address ahead of time without actually having to create the account. And as long as once someone sends funds to it, the account just magically starts existing. So this is really useful. You can just kind of generate more and more keys locally, and you basically have accounts. They just haven't been reflected on the chain yet. They're also stable across reorgs. It doesn't matter what happens. Okay, I might have gotten the number of bytes wrong. Yeah, so they're stable across reorgs. The final type is the sort of stable actor address. This is F2. These addresses are assigned to actors when you deploy code to the actor, or code bearing actor specifically. They're not predictable. I can't know ahead of time what like an actor's address will be until I create the message that creates the actor. However, once I've created the message that creates the actor, that actor will always have the same address. The really nice property about this is it means I can make one message, and then based on that message, I can make another message, and then I can make another message, and then I can actually sort of string these messages together and know that like the second message will always refer to the actor created the first message, etc. So this lets me send a sequence of messages from my account that like will always refer to like the correct actor. If something goes wrong anywhere in this chain, worst that will happen is that actor won't exist. No one else will be able to just take that address and potentially take my money. So this is what really the point of F2 addresses. It's a bit of background there. Okay. So what we needed though was kind of a new address class that supported both interactions with actors, that is code-bearing actors. They don't yet exist on chain. We need this to be both actual and counterfactual. This is a phrase you'll see in Ethereum. You don't see very much in Filecoin yet, but the counterfactual interactions are really important for payment channels. Basically, what this means is like I need to be able to talk about an address off chain. I might even need to be able to refer to it in like a payment channel voucher somewhere. And this address may never actually be relevant on chain. But I need to be able to like basically talk about an actor that could exist on chain at some point and know where it will exist if it does exist. So this is the point of predictable addressing. Basically, I can like think of an actor. I can sort of think of okay, how would I construct this actor, and then I could locally construct the address that would exist on chain. Then I could talk about the address. I could send funds to the address. I can do whatever I want with it. And eventually, if I want to, I can deploy it in a chain, but I don't actually have to. The second thing we really need is foreign addressing schemes. So the FVVM, this is really the original point of this proposal, needs a way to use Ethereum style addressing within Filecoin. Basically, like we need to be able to compute account addresses the same way they don't on Ethereum, so that we have compatibility with Ethereum tooling. We also need to be able to do the same thing for actors, because like if you have an actor, or sorry, if you have an Ethereum style contract, an EVM contract on chain, and it calls like the create to Ethereum upcode, it expects the address that comes back to come back in a very specific format, to be derived in a very specific way from the init code and the constructor parameters, all this kind of stuff. And if it's not, a lot of the ecosystem would just break. So we need some way of sort of like embedding Ethereum style addresses in Filecoin style addresses, and then ideally we have some way of going backwards. So that's what I'm trying to get across here. Where like ideally, if I have an Ethereum address that's 0x1234, I would be able to somehow embed this in some kind of Filecoin address that has 1234 somewhere in it. Same thing the other way around. I'd ideally be able to go from this style of Filecoin address back to an Ethereum address. It just like it's not actually required, but it makes it really nice for tooling, because it means that tooling can like look at a Filecoin actor somewhere and say, I know this is an Ethereum style address embedded in a Filecoin style address. So yeah, that's the goal here. Another bonus goal is we never want to have this discussion again. So I want to make a system where we can just keep on extending and building on it without having to like go back and like add a new address class. Right now, it's reasonably easy to add a new address class. Well, not easy, but it's like it's just a simple upgrade. In the future, as we add more smart contract system and user programmability, it becomes harder and harder to sort of get everyone to agree on this new address class. So it's better to sort of lift this into a user programmable position right now, so that users can just extend it and add more systems to it. Otherwise, like we'll kind of have to get everyone to agree on, yes, we want this new thing, and that's just hard to do. So that's kind of the background of the goals. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to the specifics of like the F4 proposal? Nope. Okay. So the high level proposal is, we want to use our extensible address class, really where actors on chain can assign addresses from within some subclass within this address class. So concretely, some user definable actor called an address manager with, in this example, an ID of 123 would be able to assign F4 addresses starting with F4 123F. The second F is just a separator. So we can easily see that this is the 123, like the idea of the actor that's assigning this, and the F4 is just the address class. For a full example, you could assign to an address with, an example address is F4123, FA34, whatever. That's just an arbitrary address chosen by that actor. And Molly asked if there are any security concerns about, I think, lengths. This proposal has a maximum length, or basically it states that the maximum length of the actual address is 54, or sorry, the subaddress is 54, to give us a maximum total address size of 64. The current largest address is smaller than that. I think it's like 50 something bytes, if I recall correctly, or 40 something bytes. I can't remember. I have to go back and look. So this will make it slightly larger, but 64 still fits pretty well within most systems. And it's large enough to allow users to basically put in some 32 byte hash or something like that. And then they get a few extra bytes to store whatever else they need. That's the idea. Okay, the components of this proposal. The three main components: one, the F4 address class that we just saw. Two, a concept of embryo actors. This is like a way to be able to send to an address before there's actually an actor deployed there. We deployed there. We need to put something there. So the idea is that we put a quote unquote embryo in that position. And then finally, this new method on the init actor called exec4. This is basically how you would create an actor that has a class 4 address. So first part, the class 4 address, and now I'm going to be specific and define exactly what this is. It's an address that starts with 4 as the class, then has a leb128, this is a varant, address management actor ID. So basically you take the actor ID of the quote unquote address manager, the actor that is assigning the address, encode it as a varant and tack that on. And then finally you append the subaddress. The textual format is basically just encoding of this. It starts with F4, then it has the decimal encoded actor ID. We chose to have a decimal encoded actor ID, so you could quickly look at an F0 address, look at an F4 address, and determine that yes, these like this this actor with this F0 address is controlling its F4 subclass, separated again by F. Then followed by the base 32 encoding of the subaddress, followed by checksum. This last part here is the same way we do all of our F1 through F3 addressing, where basically we'll take the actual address, tack on a checksum. The checksum is still a 4-byte checksum over the rest of the address. Then we base 32 to encode it to make it sure it's not too big, but it's also case insensitive. It's in a URL, all this kind of stuff. If you're wondering why we chose F4 decimal than F, this is a suggestion by Magic and Juan. Initially, I had proposed actually a dash here. Unfortunately, it turns out that you can't double click and select everything with a dash in the middle of it. This is really important for mobile use cases and stuff like that. So it had some UX problems. So currently I'm proposing an F here because you kind of get this mirror between the F and the F. You can see F4, some number F. And it's reasonably clear. It's not as readable as a dash, but it's easy enough to just see, or you can at least tell which actor created this address, which should be somewhat usable. We're hoping that tooling will make this even easier, but we still want people to look at a glance. Okay, exec4 is how we then actually create actors with address. Basically, it's like the exec param. So if you've ever seen the exec method on the init actor, it's exactly like that, except we're adding subaddress field to this. In the subaddress field, the calling actor can specify the calling actor can specify the subaddress of that they want to assign to this new actor that they are creating. Then the full computed F4 address would include the subaddress, start with a 0, and then have the creating actors, or the quote unquote the address management actors ID in the middle. So that's where you get at the end there. And Rule is asking if the F would appear in testnets. My plan is to say no, that it would be somewhat inconsistent with testnets, but I don't really care too much about that. It is somewhat unfortunate. We could use another separator here. I did also propose an underscore, but underscores are kind of ugly and really hard to type on mobile phones. We consider other things, but we're somewhat limited on our choices here. So I'd be happy to take additional suggestions, but we can talk about that later. Or actually, really, just if you have a suggestion there, make a comment on the FIP discussion. It's the best way to do it. Okay. Finally, the Embryo. Embryo is just like it's basically a prototype actor. So it's a way to create an actor that technically has a code CID, is the Embryo code CID, but the Embryo code CID, or the Embryo code, doesn't do anything. It rejects all non-method zero sends. So basically, it only accepts funds. And importantly, it is recognized by the FVM, so that if you try to call exec4 on some new code, the FVM will be willing to replace an Embryo code CID with your new code CID. Usually, exec and exec4 will not it's not going to replace the code of an existing actor. This is the one case where exec4 will actually replace the code of this actor with the new code CID. Then it'll call the constructor and do all the normal things you would do in exec. So finally, wrapping this up, some use cases we're trying to target here. One is predictable addressing counterfactuals, as I've already talked about. Basically, the system lets users sort of deploy and define arbitrary addressing systems, so they can basically enforce arbitrary constraints here. You can do some cool things here. One, you can, for example, ahead of time, I can compute the address from an actor's code plus parameters. And that means I can kind of I can bind a class of addresses to all actors that are constructed with specific code and parameters. I can even I can add additional things here. We can say, well, code parameters and origin, where I mix the origin into this address so that everyone sort of get their own copy of the actor. You can even do weirder things include constraints on epochs. So for example, I can define an address management actor that looks at the sort of a requested epoch constraint, validates that you're between two requested epochs, then hashes some statement that describes that and creates an address from that. That would let you basically have specific addresses that can only be deployed between some set of epochs, which could be really useful for time delayed things, lockups, that kind of stuff. And you can actually enforce this entirely within the addressing system, and basically look at the address and know from the address that this is the guarantee you have. The other, but again, the main goal that I had personally was for addressing schemes like the FVM. The system lets us completely embed foreign addresses within within normal Filecoin addresses, so it completely solves that problem. Yeah, I know I spoke very quickly there. I'm hoping people understood what I was trying to get across. What questions people have? Any discussions, comments?
Thanks, Stephen. I think there were two pretty good questions in the chat. The first one was Molly. Any security concerns re addresses potentially getting reorged or squatted by users in unpredictable ways?
Okay, sorry, I misread the question. Yes, actually. So this is these addresses are user definable. So the reorg properties will be up to the actor. This is actually why we have the current proposal actually does not propose to replace F2. So whenever you deploy an actor, if you deploy using the current exec method, you will get only an F2 address. If you deploy with the exec4 method, you'll get two addresses. You'll get an F2 and an F4. So this means that tooling that needs reorg stable addressing will use F2 addresses. If you need the other guarantees of F4, use the F4 address. Many F4 address classes will also just happen to be reorg stable, but that's not guaranteed. You could have a system where there's some kind of race somewhere where two parties try to deploy something and one party wins, and because of how this addressing system because of how that specific address management actor assigns addresses, it could assign two different addresses across a reorg. There isn't really a great way for us to enforce that these are actually reorg stable. That's why we're keeping the F2 addresses here.
And the second question from Raul, I don't think you answered this, but let me know if you did, was whether the second F would become a T in testnets.
Yeah, so probably not. That was not my plan. That is actually a very good question, and we really should discuss more about like what we actually want to put there. I just updated this proposal last night to use an F instead of a dash because the dash is clear out. It's not going to work. F is kind of the best option we have right now. But please like just follow up on the FIP discussion page and ask questions there.
Zen's question, is the counterfactual or embryo property necessary to support FEVM?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, like in the FVM, you can send to any address, any arbitrary address, and it will just sort of create an actor with no code there. It's actually it's even more complicated than that. So like, not only could an actor exist there, an account could exist there, and there's no way to know ahead of time. This is actually one of the goals and one of the motivations for this F4 address class was that we not only need to be able to like have an arbitrary actor in some target address, we need to be able to not even know what type of actor that is until later on when it's actually deployed. So yeah, we need to be able to process sends like this. We considered a bunch of alternatives. Some of the alternatives we also did not write up in the FIP because they were very, very EVM specific. But one was, for example, to have like an on-chain registry of like pending funds, where basically like if an FEVM account or not account, sorry, if an FEVM actor or EVM contract on Filecoin sent to some EVM address, and we couldn't find that within like the Filecoin system, we would hold it in some EVM specific holding zone and only release it once an actor actually gets created. We did not want to go with that approach because it makes it really hard for chain explorers. It's really confusing for users. It's really complicated. And yeah, it's just really complicated. So that's why we would like some way to sort of actually hold these in real actors on chain. We can all like, I'm also happy to discuss not having embryos, but instead automatically deploying a specific code CID to these actors. I don't think that'll work in all cases, but it technically does work for the FEVM case. But I think like other counterfactual cases would really like to sort of have a generic embryo deployed here.
Yeah, thanks. I think just to make sure I fully get it. So there are these two properties. There's the counterfactuals and there's the foreign addressing thing, but we need the counterfactuals because the EVM requires it. So you could have, this will support some not, like if you just had the foreign addressing part, you could support some other foreign address scheme which didn't need counterfactuals. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. But no, I also want to be careful about using the word counterfactuals. So I put it here because we've talked about it a lot in terms of counterfactuals. The more I read on this, the more I realize it's not the right term. The correct way of phrasing this is like actors or basically addresses that do not yet exist on chain. It's a really wordy phrase, but it's the correct way of doing it. Counterfactuals is a description of the types of interactions. Or basically, there are two types here. There are actual interactions where like you send funds to an address that does not yet exist on chain, and suddenly that address exists and it can store your funds. That is the actual interaction. Counterfactual interaction basically means like I can talk about these addresses off chain, like in payment channels and stuff like that, in vouchers or whatever. And it's as if they really existed on chain, but they never actually have to exist. So like we can go back and forth and like basically in our minds create all these actors that that might exist, but they don't. And it's as if we went through all the process of creating them, but they never actually have to exist. So you can actually like basically save a lot of gas and make really cool systems that don't have to necessarily interact with the chain by basically doing a lot of off-chain operations where you're kind of passing back and forth saying, well, I could do this, but I'm not going to. And then you say, well, because you could do that, I could do this, but I'm not going to. And we can kind of go back and forth, like talking in the counterfactual. It's really cool. But
so when you, in order to be like, to know that you're talking about something real in that counterfactual case, you do need the reality of the address existing in an embryo actor, but you don't need the actual code of the actor.
Well, no, I need the reality of the embryo or the fact that the embryo could exist. So the thing is, like, I don't need the embryo to actually exist. I just need the fact that it could exist.
Okay.
But yeah, the important thing to focus on is not the counterfactuals. It's focus on the fact that like I need the ability to basically compute the address before I deploy something there. So I'm going to give you a simple example here. Like I want to create some kind of like wallet to receive funds. Deploying this wallet is expensive. So instead of deploying a wallet and getting an address and giving the address, instead, I just give you an address where the wallet would be deployed if I deployed it. Now, if you decide to actually send funds to that address, then I can deploy the wallet and claim the funds. This is useful, for example, for like exchanges, where like or merchants or wherever, where like they just need to be able to like very quickly just like give you an address to send your funds to, for like a sale or something like that. But they don't want to have to spend any money to create that address. This kind of system lets them just create the address first, wait until someone actually decides to deposit funds at that address. And then when someone does decide to deposit funds address, then they can decide whether or not they actually want to take those funds. So just to note, like this is the same thing we can do currently with accounts with F1 and F3. This extends this to arbitrary user-defined actors, basically. Where the difference with F1 and F3 is there we don't deploy Embryo, we deploy the specific actor because we know exactly what type of actor will be there from the address type. In this case, we don't know the exact type of actor. I'm actually like I have in my head a future proposal to allow the address management actor to specify an actor that is not the Embryo actor that should be deployed on send, but that's a future thing that is not critical in this proposal here. So I don't want to mix them up too much.
Awesome. Thanks, Deb.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
I can stop sharing.
Okay.
If I can stop sharing.
You can also, if not, you can leave your screen up too. I think we're at the end of the meeting. If there's any other questions for Steb, we did link a few chats up, the link in the FIPS repo to the draft. We'll merge this today. It will still be there so that you can review it, add comments, questions, etc. And Lucky, it would be great if you could flag this one in particular in this week's governance update so that folks can find it pretty easily as well. We have only a couple of minutes left. Usually we have Q&A. Jennifer, I think you messaged me, you quickly want to flag something for folks.
Yes, as we all know, we can never stop or taking a break at this network. So as we are shipping out a V17, I started a new discussion in the TPM repository to start like talking about for people to raise ideas for what's the next network upgrade gonna be. I know like the product team was kind of like in consensus like 3 months ago that if NV18 is gonna be about FEVM and 2.1 launch into the Filecoin network, which is projected at next year February. I just want to make sure that we are still agreeing on that. If not, what's the other options? Do we have any other higher priority that we have to ship sooner? I think we don't have time today, but like I think we should start discussion sooner rather than later. Because if we want to change the scope or change the timeline, we have to start like planning accordingly already. We do have like 5 minutes, so if there's any like quick comments, people should like raise. Nope.
Yeah. I'm personally continuing to work on the assumption that the FEVM will be the next network upgrade. I don't know how many FIPS we have open how many FEVM unrelated FIPS we have open that are close to being ready that we can have a conversation of whether or not we want to include. Prefer to not include, but yeah, not much has changed for me.
That's a very good point. Like I want to call out, we also reach a consensus. Just like if we are doing an upgrade for FEVM, that upgrade should only contain that FIPS that's needed for FEVM launch. Alex, I think you are unmuted.
Yeah, I agree with all of those like description of previous agreements that we've made. But thanks for opening the discussion. We can do most of it async, but I think we definitely should open discussion about the opportunity to make some crypto economic changes in lieu of Fit36, something simpler, faster, more easily accepted. I definitely think we should make space for that because the problems that proposal was going after are real, and it would be we are the group that decides the network upgrade. Well, not exactly, I guess, because Caitlin just defined that we don't. But I think implementers should be open to us making space for something sufficiently small and simple that's targeting those same problems.
Sounds good.
As long as we can avoid threatening the FVM timeline too much. It would be handy to get an update on the FVM's projections, I guess, maybe in that thread, to help us understand what space exists as things get more and more clear. But this group we shouldn't lock ourselves into our own previous decisions. They were decisions we made. We have the scope to change them for the future. It's definitely worth opening that discussion.
I already seen a couple like FIPS that's being opened up, like as a follow-up of FIPS36. I will encourage everyone in this group to start like async conversation on like the motivation, the priority, the urgency for like related changes that's needed for the network. We can move it to async. I would love to, I would love to propose that for the next core dev in November, we can have like 2 agenda items on the call versus getting a new update from like FVM team on the project timeline, engineering updates. I know there are exciting news to share about BuilderNet as well. So if we can have a share on the core dev meeting, that would be super helpful. The other way, start to talk about like get an update on the 18 like sentiment, that would be great. And maybe have the HC discussion, but we will see.
This sounds really good. I think there were lots of ideas and open threads open during this conversation. So Raul, as follow-up, we will sort of segment out STEP's presentation so that is individually accessible to everyone on YouTube. I'll also write up a summary in the Core Devs channel with links to FIP drafts, not just STEBs, but also the ones that Jennifer is mentioning, the planning thread. So if you want to weigh in, we'll also open up a new thread in the TPM repo so that if you want to contribute to deciding the structure of these meetings going forward, you can share your thoughts there as well. Thank you everyone for your contributions today. Again, it is great to see this meeting continue to grow, even as we have lots and lots of big questions to work through. I think everyone has another meeting at the ecosystem all hands right now, so I'll let you all go, but see you all soon and talk to you probably even sooner. Bye.
Thank you. See you.